Well, hey, good morning. It's the first time I've seen that video, I think. I love it. Very cool. My name is Chad Myers. I'm a guest communicator here, guest speaker here, and helping fill in during this season of transition for the summit. Excited to be here, glad to be here. My family is with me, and we've been attending here regularly since beginning of September, mid-September, I think. Really glad to, not glad, that was the wrong way to say it. We're finishing off the Proverbs series. So I'm not like, oh yeah, thank God we're finishing off the Proverbs series. I'm just saying, like, I'm glad to be here in an attempt to do justice to bring to a close a series on wisdom, a series on how to walk with God in wisdom, what it means to get wisdom, where to find wisdom, and how to maintain wisdom. So you were just talking and I interrupted. That's very rude of me. So I'm going to ask you a question and I want you to talk again. All right? Here we go. What is your favorite season and why? What is your favorite season? Fall, winter, spring, summer, and why? Ready? Go. All right. Anybody dare to share? What? Winter? Who are you? Boo. Boo. Get out of this house, young lady. That was my youngest kid. Someone else say winter over here? What is it with you young teenagers? It's freezing in winter. You get a little older, you'll be like, not winter. What else? Some of you said winter also. Summer. Why summer? Because it's not cold. What's that? Sun, beach, water. Does it get any better? Sun, beach, water. Yes. What? Why? It's hard to hear you through your giggling. Could you please speak regularly? Because the fall, that's another kid of mine, so I'm picking on them. I guess you guys thought you could just talk and take over the sermon. Oh, because your birthday's in fall. And the leaves change colors. It's beautiful. Anyone else fall? I like fall. I love the fall. Do you have something? Nope. Yes. Not fall. Okay. No one said spring? Spring? Fall and spring leading into a new season. Seasons, they come to an end. They start anew. There's transition. And I'm going to try to summarize wisdom literature in the scriptures kind of through the lens of the seasons of wisdom. The seasons of wisdom. We walk through different seasons in our life too. Sometimes it's fall where colors change and leaves come down and it starts to get colder and you start to prepare for winter. Sometimes it's winter where you feel like there's no light and there's no life and it's dark and you're kind of in this, hibernation stage and you're wondering where God is and what is life supposed to be like and maybe why does it hurt so bad. Sometimes it's spring and there's just so much newness and goodness of life coming forth, and sometimes it's summer. Pool, sun, and beach, and everything is great. We're going to talk about seasons of wisdom and kind of how each one of the books that we went through and overviewed fit into that. Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, and even Job. Why do we need wisdom just in general? Why do we need wisdom in general? And I would say this: we need wisdom for life in the gray. We need wisdom for life in the gray. Yesterday, I was attempting to put up some Christmas lights on our house. Anyone already starting to decorate? All right, I wanted to get it done because Thanksgiving is late this year and it's going to be December 1st very quick. And so I wanted to get it done before that. So I'm up on our house and I'm trying to put lights on the roof. And I wanted to get over our garage. And it's probably, I don't know the exact angle of the pitch, but it's probably a 40-degree. And that's pretty steep if you look at a roof. And so I was up there and I was holding a Christmas lights and I have nothing to hold on to. And the roof is a little bit old, if you catch where I'm going with this, and it's not a very exciting story. I didn't fall. I'll just, tell you the ending. But as I was up there, I started on the side, and I started to get down low, and then I went on the peak, and I was able to get the peak, but it was just that middle that was about 15 foot off the ground that I started to get over there, and I wanted to grab the edge and maybe put some lights on, but my feet started to slip a little bit, and my side that I was sitting on started to slip a little bit, and I thought to myself, I'm teaching on wisdom tomorrow. Maybe I should practice it. So I got off the roof and I called a good friend of mine who had a very tall ladder. And I was like, that is a great idea. We need wisdom for life in the gray. There's nothing in the Bible that says you should get on a 40-degree pitch roof or you shouldn't get on a 40-degree pitch roof. God doesn't tell us about those things. God has some very straightforward things he says to us, but there's a lot of things that we just don't know, that God doesn't tell us. Like it's not black and white, and sometimes we just wish he did, but he doesn't. So we need wisdom for life in the gray. For example, God tells us to love our neighbor. That's very clear. Can I hate my neighbor? No, we cannot. Okay, so I got to figure that one out. Love my neighbor, but he doesn't tell us how. And the way you might love a certain neighbor that you're in relationship with may look different than the way I might love a certain neighbor that I'm in relationship with. You see? It's gray. It's not clear. And God created us as strong and powerful agents who he wants us to use our agency and use our noggins and wisdom and know ourselves and know our surroundings. Say, how do we do this part well? And that may even look different from season to season. God also says, share the message of Jesus to the ends of the earth. That's clear, right? That's clear. It's black and white. How do we do it? Well, we get to figure that out. We get to experiment. We get to guess. We get to try. We get to make mistakes. We get to fail. We get to pivot. We get to say, well, I'm going to do it a little bit differently this time. That didn't seem too effective. The other Saturday morning, we got a loud doorbell ring at 9 a.m. I was like, who is this? Who is ringing the door this loud at 9 a.m. in the morning? Our kids haven't made friends in the neighborhood yet, so I'm like, I have no idea who this could be. And so I opened the door, and it was two tall, strong gentlemen, and they were like, hey, we're just here to share the good news of Jesus with you. And I thought to myself, it's 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning. Half of my family's still asleep. They need the good news of Jesus, but I'm okay. I thought about saying, you know what, I am a firm member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I would love to visit you guys later today at your house if you could just provide me with an address. But I didn't say any of that. Because I thought, you know what, well-meaning intentions, good guys, hey, had a short conversation with them. But then I thought to myself, I don't know if door-to-door is effective for people. It's not, I wouldn't do it personally. Maybe it is for you. We get to experiment with that. We get to say, I don't know, I can try it, I can pivot, I can change it. You see, the beautiful thing about God is this. God is in control, but God is not about control. God is in control, but God is not about control. And what I mean by that is this, is God is not a micromanaging, controlling God. He's just not. And for some people with the temperament of like, I just want you to tell me everything to do so that life works out and there's never any variables, it just doesn't work that way. God says, I've made you creatures of the sixth day. That's a beautiful, wonderful thing. You're supposed to be here on the earth. The earth is a beautiful, wonderful place to be. It's fallen and broken, but God is repairing it. And I want you to walk well, to create, to use wisdom. And he gives us parameters, but then we get to color in the insides to create and say, hey, this is who I am. This is how I'm wired. This is what I'm going to try. We get to experiment with that. That's why we need wisdom. We get to ask God for wisdom, and God provides. God speaks through the scriptures. He speaks through other ways to us as well. So when it starts to get a little colder outside, I don't know if my youngest was just playing or not, that her favorite season is winter, but you get forced indoors a little bit more. And one of the things that we like to do is play board games. Anyone? Play some board games. We like to play different types of board games. And one of the games that I brought with me today as a little bit of an illustration is Settlers of Catan. Catan, tomato, tomato. I don't know, right? Settlers of Catan. And if you know this game, we actually, the last time we played it, we stopped playing it. There was so much tension in the game as a family. I just said, you know what? Maybe we'll let that one sit for a few months before we try to come back to it. Very competitive. Nothing to do with me being competitive at all. But you take the board of Catan and you kind of lay it out, and the idea is that, you're supposed to roll dice and you're supposed to acquire different goods, whether it's lumber or sheep or straw, and you're supposed to build roads and settlements, and whoever has the most roads, settlements, and you can get certain victory points. That's essentially how you win the game of Catan. And you have a great game overview here. I brought the instructions, and there's dice, and there's a little guy called the robber, and he sits there, and I brought the orange houses here. And you can set up the game, and you can, by the structure of the creators, you can play the game. Now, there's not only one way to win. There's quite a few different ways. There's quite a few different strategies, and based on how you got set up and the roll of your dice, you get to change as you go along. But there are rules and instructions. And for it to be a fair, competitive game, everyone has to play by the rules and the instructions. This is a little bit like the book of Proverbs. Proverbs is guidance for everyday life. Proverbs is guidance for everyday life, hear this, in the season of stability. In the season of stability. When the game is set up, and the instructions are clear, and people know how to play, and everyone's playing fair and playing by the rules. There are proverbs that are guidance for the rhythms of everyday life and for the season of stability. Doesn't mean there's no stresses, doesn't mean there's no burdens, no challenges, but you're in somewhat of a stable season. Anyone in a season of stability right now? Nobody will begrudge you. It's that, okay, we're in the daily grind of life. We're going through our days, we're going through our weeks. Jobs are secure, kids are in school, there's no major ailments, major tragedies. You're kind of in the ebb and flow of the 9 to 5 and then the weekends. This is a little bit like Proverbs. Proverbs gives us kind of big picture sweeps of statements for how to live and how to work in the ebb and flow of the season of stability. Proverbs touches on things like friendship. Proverbs 27, 5-6 says this, "Better is open rebuke than hidden love. Faithful are the wounds of a friend. Profuse are the kisses of an enemy." Faithful are the wounds of a friend. So Proverbs teaches us what type of friend we ought to be. When we say, God, give me wisdom, it's not just what type of choice should I make to ensure the best outcome. It's what type of person ought I to be? What type of character ought I to have? How do I orient my heart and mind and resources towards what Proverbs is pointing me to? So, what type of friend am I to be? It also talks about speech. Listen to Proverbs 11:13. "A gossip betrays a confidence, but a trustworthy person keeps a secret." I don't know if did we do a proverb on speech, on words? It's a large theme in the book of Proverbs. What do we do with our mouths, with our tongues? What type of words do we use? Are they encouraging words? Do they lift each other up? Do they build each other up? Do they tear down? Actually, I had to text my son the other morning as he went to school because I was grumpy later in the evening, and I said some words that, in my head, I was not very encouraging to him. So next morning, I just said, "Hey, bro, I love you. I'm sorry for sharing words that didn't build you up and tore you down. Would you please forgive me?" And great, 14-year-old boy response, he just thumbs up it. I'm going to take that as a yes. Proverbs invites us to consider what we do with our speech. Anybody ever been gossiped about? It's a bit of a sick feeling, isn't it? To know that you were gossiped about. And gossip doesn't have to be a lie. It could be true, but it may not be our truth to share. One of the statements I've heard some people use lately, and some friends that I am close to and I trust with my life, they've started using this phrase, "That's not my story to tell." That's not my story to tell. And I thought, what a brilliant way of redirecting something that could potentially go into what we think may be innocent, but it could really turn into gossip. Hey, what about this person, or what happened here? What's going on with them? That's not my story to tell. It's their story to tell, if they choose to share it. The book of Proverbs and seasons of stability also talk about marriage. Proverbs 31:11 talks about earning each other's trust and enriching our lives. Now, I know Proverbs 31 is typically addressed to women, but there are beautiful truths in there that really are for each partner in the marriage relationship. Earning each other's trust and enriching our lives. Proverbs talks about what type of husband to be, what type of wife to be. How do we protect our marriage? How do we enrich our marriage? Proverbs talks about generosity. A major theme through the book of Proverbs. Proverbs 22:19, the generous will themselves be blessed, for they share their food with the poor. The generous will themselves be blessed because they share their food with the poor. Proverbs often juxtaposes generosity and greed. In fact, I think it was Rick Warren who wrote The Purpose-Driven Life, pastor out in California. He said this, the only cure for greed is generosity. I think it's true. The only cure for greed is to counteract the hoarding of resources for self with generosity, sacrificing for the sake of others in need. So, great announcement earlier. I don't know where Anushri went, but yeah, there's a lot of ornaments on the tree out there that people are in need. But this is a season of stability, right? This is people are rolling the dice and they're moving along, and everyone's playing by the rules and checking the instructions where we get a little bit confused or we need to get lined up. But what about when that changes? What about when maybe no one's really agreed upon the instructions? Maybe people aren't playing by the rules. We move from a season of stability to a season of confusion. This is where the wisdom of Ecclesiastes comes in. Ecclesiastes is guidance for when everyday life doesn't make sense. If you haven't picked up on it, one of my goals in this sermon is to make us, hopefully, by God's grace, a little bit more hungry for the wisdom literature, and maybe for this to act as a resource, as, you know what? Whenever I'm going through a season of confusion, perhaps I turn to the book of Ecclesiastes. Whenever I'm in a season of stability, perhaps I look to wisdom in the Proverbs for how to order my life going forward. Ecclesiastes is helpful for when everyday life just doesn't work. When we roll the dice and we move something, our character along, but when someone else comes in and just takes it away. When someone else is playing by a different set of rules that we thought the world was supposed to operate on. When we look out and we say, how did this happen? How can you do that? How can you say that? Did you see the person who worked their way to the top by immoral means? How does this work? That's very confusing. You're not playing by the rules, and yet it looks like you're getting blessed, so to speak. You never play a board game and you know the other person's cheating. Some of y'all nod your head, don't look around. Maybe they're sitting next to you. It can be very frustrating. because you thought to yourself, I'm doing everything I can to walk well within the guidelines of this structure, and it just seems like you don't even care. And yet, you're getting a better outcome than I am. That's confusing. That's confusing. I think this happens to us in different stages of our life as well. I think some people, depending on the type of home we grow up in, depending on the type of home you grow up in, there's kind of this blissful childhood and blissful innocence, and you come out of that at some point in life, probably middle school, and for a while the world feels safe and insulated and whatnot, and then it starts to get a little bit bigger than you, and there's a lot more variables and a little bit more confusing, and you start to see things happen that really don't make sense to you. That's when the wisdom of Ecclesiastes comes in. Listen to Ecclesiastes 8:14. There is something else meaningless. Now you remember how the writer starts off Ecclesiastes. Meaningless, meaningless, everything's meaningless. It's a Debbie Downer of a book, okay? It's for those of you a little more melancholy, you love Ecclesiastes. It's like, it's your jam. You're like, oh yeah, it's dark, it's complex, it's confusing, like none of it really makes sense. That's where I love to live. Like, I get that. But listen to this. He starts off the book, meaningless, meaningless, or vapor, vapor is actually more of a literal translation. It's a vapor. It's a mist. Life's like this. It's just a mist. It's air. It doesn't even make sense. He says there's something else that's meaningless that occurs on the earth. Listen to this. The righteous who get what the wicked deserve, and the wicked who get what the righteous deserve. This, too, I say, is meaningless. If you're going to preach on Ecclesiastes, you better bring some drama to it. It's meaningless. Now, if you're anything like me, you've thought the exact same thing. You've looked out and you thought, this person has ordered their life. They're not perfect, but they've ordered their life in such a way, and yet why do these bad things happen to them? Or, I've ordered my life in such a way, God. Why did this happen to our kid? Why did we get this diagnosis? Why does my spouse want to leave? I don't understand. I ordered my life in such a way, and it seems like it's still no protection from a fallen and broken world. And the writer of Ecclesiastes says, there's no good answer. There's just no good answer. To look out and say, the righteous get what the wicked deserve, and the wicked get what the righteous deserve. This, too, I say, is meaningless. That doesn't make any sense. And I think God comes alongside us and says, in our limited, finite experience of the world, I agree. After the writer of Ecclesiastes has kind of explored every pleasure there is, every type of worldview there is to make sense of life, and still comes up a bit empty, he actually makes this conclusion. Because it seems like everything is meaningless, because you played by the rules and someone else didn't, and it didn't work out, and there's all sorts of more questions than there are answers, he says this in Ecclesiastes 12:13-14. Now that all has been heard, here is the conclusion of the matter. Fear God and keep his commandments. For this is the duty of all mankind. For God will bring every deed into judgment, including every hidden thing, whether it is good or evil. The wisdom of Ecclesiastes is don't get too tripped up on trying to make sense of something that won't make sense before God comes back. What our responsibility is to fear God and to keep his commandments. To keep walking, to keep being faithful as best I can by God's grace, step by step by step, even when it just doesn't make sense. As far as I remember, that's what biblical faith is. That's what biblical trust is. I can't see. I got more questions than answers. I'm very confused, and yet I'm going to walk forward in the ways of God. If Proverbs helps us in a season of stability and Ecclesiastes helps us in a season of confusion, then Job, my friends, is for the season of pain. Job is guidance for when everyday life falls apart. The pieces get scattered. C.S. Lewis says, all we can hear is the shriek of our own pain. It's not just confusion. It's agony. It's suffering. It's pain. Job is guidance for when everyday life falls apart. You know that one of the main themes of Job is actually comfort. The word comfort, just in and of itself as a noun, is woven through the book of Job 11 times, not even as a verb or any other conjugate, but it's a noun going through the book of Job 11 times. The Hebrew word is mechakah. You're going to try that one with me? I'll give you one more chance. Mechakah. Everybody said mechakah. Pretty good. For some of you who are feeling a little bit under the weather, you sounded perfect. Mechakah. It's comfort, because Job's life doesn't not only make sense anymore, but the pieces are scattered. Lost his children, lost his land, lost his wealth, lost his health. And then the rest of the book of Job is actually about these people that come around him, and they try to do what? They try to comfort him. Have you noticed how they try to comfort him, though? They try to explain to Job how he got in this situation in the first place. Well, Job, let me read you some Proverbs of how these things come upon people and how this may have happened and what you might be able to do differently to avoid this in the future. And they begin to explain to Job, God is just, man, if bad things happen, not really sure what you might have done to deserve them. Has anyone ever been told that? I've been told that. My wife's been told that. You know, the refrigerator breaks down, the oven breaks down, we need car repairs, and someone looks at us and says, man, you guys must not be living right. Now, they're kind of joking, but they're also kind of not. And then the counter, where everything is going great and need no car repairs, and look at this is all working fantastic, and you got this new job, and all the kids are healthy, and oh man, you guys must be living right. They're kind of joking, but they're kind of not. And that's what Job's friends do. Job, it's probably something that you said or did. What else can we say? You know what Job says to them in Job 16:2? I have heard many things like these. You are miserable comforters, all of you. Fair play, Job. Fair play. For anyone in the midst of overwhelming grief and loss and pain, for someone to come in and try to explain theologically why we're there, or even to imply that we have done something wrong to get ourselves there, is absolutely offensive. And Job says, you guys are miserable comforters. That's why Romans is very clear. We weep with those who weep. We rejoice with those who rejoice. We weep with those who weep. We rejoice with those who rejoice. Sometimes we get that backwards. Someone's rejoicing, things are going good. We're like, oh yeah, well, you better watch out for this. Or we're a little jealous and maybe not as happy as we should be for them, or someone's going through something very painful and we're so uncomfortable with it, we don't know how to handle it, so we try to put positive spins on it. And it's going to be okay, and it's going to be. We weep with those who weep. We rejoice with those who rejoice. This idea of comfort in the season of pain is woven through Job. Finally, they've exhausted themselves, Job and his three friends. Job 40, verse 6 and 7, God says this: "Then the Lord spoke to Job out of the storm. Brace yourself like a man. I will question you, and you shall answer me." And what does God spend 2 chapters doing in his questions? Were you there? Were you there when I parted the seas? Were you there when I put the stars in their place? Were you there when I built the storehouses for the snow and the ice and the hail? Can you take Leviathan by his mouth and lead him? Can you take the monsters of the deep and tame them? Who were you, Job, and where were you when I created the world and the universe and the planets and the sun and the stars and the seasons? And it rings loud and clear, but we have to read it carefully. God comforts Job by inviting him to consider his transcendence, his bigness. I want you to consider my greatness. Were you there? Can you do that? Charles Spurgeon said it something like this: "The sovereignty of God is the pillow upon which the Christian rests his or her head." No, I can't do that. And no, I wasn't there. But you can. And you did. And I know my Redeemer lives. As we sang earlier, he's my friend. He's my friend. I want to close just with a couple thoughts here, and then I want to attempt to point us to how does all this work out in the wisdom of the cross. One of the challenges when we go through seasons, these seasons of stability, confusion, pain, they can come out of nowhere. They can overlap. They can be cyclical. They can be sequential. You can be going through several at one time. One of the challenges when we go through seasons like this in life is that it's easy to become pessimistic or optimistic. But wait a second, I thought one of those was all right. I ask you this, a bit of rhetorical: is the glass half full or half empty? Is the glass half full or half empty? I think the cross says neither. Neither. Listen to 1 Corinthians 1, 23 through 25. "But we preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to the Gentiles. But to those whom God has called, both Jews and Greeks, Christ the power of God and what? The wisdom of God. For the foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom, and the weakness of God is stronger than human strength." The cross, the crucifixion of the eternal Son of God, actually prevents us from being pessimists, from falling into cynicism, which is very easy to do when we go through difficult seasons. To say, you see, nothing really works out. I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's all broken and it's all flawed and it's all going to fail in the end. And the cross says, no. No. There is hope based on the one who overcame sin, death, and the devil, and who leads his people into that type of life. But, by the way, the root of cynicism is fear. The cross also prevents us from going into optimism. The root of optimism is denial. to put on the rose-colored glasses and to say, you know what, we're going to just not pay attention to all those hard things, and God's going to fix everything and overcome everything, and right now I'm just going to sing God is great and God is good and a bit of kumbaya, and I'm not going to pay attention to all the suffering that I'm going through right now or the suffering that my family's going through right now. And the cross actually prevents us from being optimists because it says, guess what? The world is capable of great evil. It crucified the eternal Son of God. Let us not forget that. And let us not be surprised that we might suffer as he suffered. You see, I believe that the crucifixion of Jesus actually invites us to something totally different: radical honesty and radical hope. Radical honesty and radical hope in the seasons of life. That's the wisdom of Jesus. That's the wisdom of the cross. Radical honesty, that was hurt, that was wrong. They gossiped, they slandered, this diagnosis hurt, this lifestyle, this is hurting me. Radical honesty, radical hope. And yet, if God can take the most evil thing in the history of the world, the crucifixion of the eternal Son of God, and turn it into the most beautiful thing in the world, what can he do with my pain? What can he do with my suffering? And Joseph is right. What was meant for evil, God uses for good. That's the wisdom of the cross. That's the deep wisdom of the suffering of Jesus. So yes, great harm and pain and evil can happen here. And yes, great beauty and redemption and transformation and life can and is happening here. That's the wisdom of Christ. Let's pray. Father, thank you so much for your scriptures. Thank you for your people in the Old Testament who thought very deeply about you and who wrote very deeply about you, so that we, thousands of years later, might come to this text and might come to this book and say, feed me, nourish me, guide me, lead me, comfort me. And yet we know that the Bible is not you. It points us to you. You're the living God. You enter into our fray, you enter into our mess, you enter into our sin and our own brokenness in our lives, and you say, I know what it's like. I've been there. I'm with you. I will not leave you as orphans. I'm here with you. I will come to you. Thank you, Christ. Give us the faith and the courage to be radically honest and radically hopeful. May we walk in that wisdom. We pray in Christ's name.